You don't cheer for a hockey team, you worship a corpse. 24 Stanley Cups, the holy number, etched into your brain before you learned long division, tattooed on your soul like it's your social insurance number. And what do you have to show for it? A playoff win every few years, a highlight of Carey Price stealing a game in 2015, and a pile of dusty VHS tapes from the Reagan administration. These banners, they don't inspire, they haunt. Other teams celebrate history. Montreal weaponizes it. You walk into the Bell Center, look up, and it's like walking into a mausoleum with better lighting. All that success, none of it's yours. You didn't witness dynasties. You inherited trauma. Every time a rookie hits the ice, the broadcast immediately compares him to Maurice the Rocket Richard. The guy had a job at a factory during the offseason and smoked heaters between periods. But sure, let's expect some 19-year-old from the Q to carry the torch. Every trade, every draft pick, every coaching hire isn't judged on results. It's judged on whether it would have passed a vibe check in 1978. You think you're building something new? You're just reenacting old glory with worse players and more analytics. Vegas has more finals appearances in the last 5 years than the Habs do in 2 decades. But hey, you've got 24. Back when the league had 6 teams and most of them were owned by your uncle. Your last cup came when Jurassic Park was still in theaters. Now you're just hoping not to get clowned by Ottawa on a Tuesday night. So you chant, "Go Habs, go!" like it still means something. But deep down, you know, you're not chasing greatness. You're dragging its corpse through another rebuild. But history doesn't just hang in the rafters. In Montreal, it lurks. The Montreal Forum, the cathedral of hockey, a place where legends were made, and where the current team would lose 4-1 to the Coyotes. You never saw it. You just hear about it, constantly. Every commercial break, every player interview, every time the team blows a lead, someone starts whispering about the spirit of the Forum. Let's get real. The ghosts of the Forum aren't lifting you up. They're haunting your locker room. You think Nick Suzuki feels inspired walking past Guy Lafleur's mural before puck drop? No. He feels like he's being judged by a perm-smoking ghost who once put up 125 points while bleeding out of his face. You don't get motivation from this legacy. You get flashbacks to when your team mattered. It's not a home ice advantage. It's a historical guilt trip. Every time the Habs lose a board battle, a boomer lights a candle and mumbles, "Beliveau would never." You didn't grow up watching greatness. You grew up surrounded by portraits of it, like being raised in a museum where every exhibit silently judges you for not being tougher, classier, or more bilingual. The ghosts are everywhere. In the chants, in the jerseys, in every single piece of content the team posts that has to start with "back when." And the worst part, they still expect you to live up to it. Your team could go 30, 48, and 4, miss the playoffs by Christmas, and the headlines will still be, "Habs channeled Forum energy in moral victory over Red Wings." Spoiler, they didn't. The ghosts are just doing what the roster can't, showing up. And just when the ghosts started to fade, Carey Price stepped in and became one himself. Carey Price didn't play goal. He performed miracles, night after night, year after wasted year. You didn't win games. Carey just made sure you didn't lose by 6. And what did you do with that generational talent? You surrounded him with a blue line made of traffic cones, a power play that could be outscored by a high school marching band, and a carousel of coaches who thought structure meant, "Hope Carey bails us out again." He dragged his team to a Stanley Cup final in 2021, on one leg, behind a roster that would have been a first-round exit in any other city. It was heroic. It was legendary. It was a fluke. And you knew it, because as soon as the clock hit 0 in Game 5 against Tampa, reality came crashing in. Price's body was shot. The roster was a house of cards. And the front office's plan? Vibes. Just vibes. He gave you everything. Heart, soul, hip cartilage. And in return, the Habs gave him David Savard, Mike Hoffman, and a leadership group that couldn't lead a team out of a paper bag. Now, he's done. Career on hold, contract in limbo. Cap hit buried on LTIR like hockey's version of financial hospice. And the worst part? You're still trying to replace him. Not with another goalie. With a feeling. Because when Carey was in net, even when the team sucked, and God, did they suck, you still believed you had a shot. Now, you cycle through Montembeault, Primo, and a rotating cast of goalies of the future, who mostly serve as human shot blockers with health insurance. It's not a crease anymore. It's a graveyard. You didn't just lose your goalie, you lost your identity. And now you're stuck wandering through the rebuild like a hungover ex, clutching old Price highlights and whispering, "We could have won it all, if we weren't complete idiots." But Price wasn't just failed by his teammates. He was failed by an institution still living in a language-first fantasy league. In Montreal, it's not who's the best coach available. It's can he combine verbs in a post-game scrum? The Habs are the only team in professional sports that runs its front office like a French immersion program. You want to coach this team? You better speak fluent French, pass a media etiquette exam, and be able to deflect a TVA interview without crying. Forget resume, forget strategy, forget winning. If you can't say forecheck en français, you're not even getting an interview. You could clone Scotty Bowman, inject him with analytics, caffeine, and the ghost of Toe Blake. But if he doesn't have a Quebecois accent, he's coaching Pee-wees and Trois Rivières. This isn't a mediocrity, it's a linguistic loyalty test. Other teams ask, can this guy run a power play? Montreal asks, can he order poutine without sounding like an Anglo tourist? And don't get it twisted, this isn't about the fans, it's about optics, politics, headlines. Because losing is acceptable, but God forbid you lose in English. The Canadiens are the NHL's most bilingual franchise. Unfortunately, they're also most irrelevant. Every press conference is a balancing act. Every front office hire is a cultural referendum. Every decision is filtered through a decades-old identity crisis. Meanwhile, every other team in the league is hiring the smartest person in the room. Montreal? They're hiring the one who can read cue cards in 2 languages. And sure, it makes for great sound bites, but it also makes for a team stuck in a time warp, trapped between trying to be competitive and trying to be correct. And if you ever wonder why this team hasn't built anything sustainable in 30 years, start with this. They're more fluent in excuses than execution. And somehow, through all the politics, press conferences, and painful rosters, it worked. Briefly, kind of. For one glorious, delusional summer, you believed. The 2021 playoff run was magic. Montreal rolled through Toronto like a freight train of trauma, swept Winnipeg like they were doing house cleaning, stunned Vegas with a lineup held together by duct tape and Carey Price's groin. You were convinced, this is it, we're back. But you weren't. You were riding a once-in-a-generation goalie, a freak pandemic format, and the most emotionally unstable Toronto collapse since the 90s. This wasn't a cup contender. That was a Cinderella story written by a drunk ghostwriter. And when the clock hit 0 in Game 5 against Tampa, the spell shattered. Montreal wasn't ascending. They were peaking, by accident. In the front office, they treated that fluke like a blueprint, signed the wrong guys, lost the right ones, let the whole thing rot before the confetti even hit the ground. No sustainable core, no depth, just vibes, injuries, and a reset that looked more like a freefall. In 1 year, you went from the final to the draft lottery. That run didn't launch a new era. It ended the last illusion. You weren't contenders. You were cosplaying one. And now every time someone posts that 2021 highlight reel, it hits different. Not like pride, like grief. Because you now know, that wasn't the beginning of something great. It was the death rattle of a team trying to outrun its own reflection. But that run didn't save the franchise. It just made the trap stronger. You don't root for the Canadiens. You inherit them, like a bad knee or a cursed heirloom, passed down from your dad, who got it from his dad, who swears he remembers 86 like it was yesterday, even though he's misquoting the box score. It's not fandom. It's generational trauma in jersey form. You wear the sweater because you have to. Because walking away feels like betrayal, even if staying feels like self-harm. You watch every game, even when they're out of the playoff race by mid-November. Even when the top line is made up of prospects and prayer. Even when your most exciting player is some 20-year-old you hope doesn't get ruined here like the last 5. And why? Because your grandfather did. Because you remember being 5 years old yelling, "Go Habs, go!" in your living room while the team lost 4-2 to the Hurricanes on a Tuesday night. But even when they suck, and they suck a lot, they're still yours. The history, the colors, the ghost of Beliveau glaring down from the rafters every time you allow a shorthanded goal. It's all part of the package. It's the bond that keeps you watching when they're down 5-1 in the second. It's the reason you still argue on Twitter about whether Slavkovsky will figure it out. It's why you convince yourself every training camp that this is the year the rebuild clicks. It never does. But you say it anyway, because loyalty isn't rational, it's ritual. And every fall, you fall for it again, like clockwork, like fools. You whisper it under your breath, against all evidence, with a straight face. This year, c'est le bon. It isn't, but you'll be back, because you're not a fan. You're a hostage of heritage.